Welcome to the Inside Elections podcast, where we analyze elections in a nonpartisan, data-driven, and accessible way. We're fast approaching the start of the primary season, and in just 2 weeks, voters in Illinois will head to the polls to determine their nominees for Senate and a whole slew of House races. In this episode, we'll dive into the blockbuster Senate primary on the Democratic side, the 4 open House seats with Democratic primaries, and a handful of other races in the land of Lincoln. And we'll do it with Politico's Shia Kapos. Buckle up. I'm Nathan Gonzales, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, the go-to place for nonpartisan analysis for more than 40 years. And I'm headed to the National PAC Conference in Tampa, which is located in Florida's 14th District, represented by Democrat Kathy Castor. That's the situation for now. At least the Republicans look to redistrict the state sometime later this spring.
And I'm Jacob Rubashkin, deputy editor of Inside Elections. And I spent a couple days in recent weeks in Michigan's 10th District in Macomb County and a little piece of Oakland County up there as well, reporting on the Republican primary taking place in that open seat that is close to the center of the House battlefield, interviewing the candidates and getting out on the trail a little bit. You can read my story up at InsideElections.com today.
And literally, you were in a smoke-filled room, was part of the story.
Yes.
Give folks a little taste who haven't read that yet, where you were and where you were interviewing one of the candidates.
So I was at a high school reunion in Bloomfield Hills, which is actually a little bit outside of the district. But the reason why I was there was because both of the candidates who are running for the Republican nomination in the 10th District, Robert Lugerai and Mike Bouchard, went to this high school, a Catholic all-boys high school called Brother Rice. And so did John James, who is the outgoing member who represents the seat, who is running for governor. So did Mike Bouchard's father, who is the Oakland County Sheriff, also named Mike Bouchard, and a number of other political and sports figures from around the state. So very much kind of the center of a certain social circle at Brother Rice. And I went there to talk to Robert Lugerai, one of the candidates who I interviewed, as there was intramural boxing matches going on between the University of Michigan Boxing Club and universities from elsewhere in the region.
It's a really great story. I'd encourage folks to read it online, and including lots of little tidbits that the two candidates, Lugerai and Bouchard, played on the same football team when they were in high school. They were on the same team. So just a great story. And in Florida, if those of you, if you're listening to this and you are either going to Tampa next week to the conference, or you are in Tampa right now as you're listening, be sure and say hi. Let's hang out. So it's going to be a little warmer than it is here, at least in DC. Before we bring in Shia, what are some recent headlines that folks shouldn't miss?
In Virginia, Democrats delayed their candidate filing and the primary date from June 16th all the way to August 4th. This is in anticipation of voters approving a new congressional map in an April special election. The map would radically redraw several of the Old Dominion seats in an effort to help Democrats pick up as many as 4 additional seats. Crucially, though, the change in filing deadline and primary date will take place regardless of whether voters approve or slap down the new map. So no matter what happens in the referendum, the primary is going to be 2 months delayed.
And that potential for +4 for Democrats in Virginia added to the potential +3 to 5 in California. That map is done, but the races still need to take place. I mean, that's a big chunk. Republicans have Texas on their side, and are maybe going to do Florida later this year. But that Virginia piece is a big number when it comes to the +3 overall that Democrats need to win the House.
Yes.
The Tony Gonzales situation in Texas has escalated for House Republicans. Most recently, graphic sexual texts from the congressman to his aide became public, and a handful of Gonzales' Republican colleagues in Congress have called on him to resign or drop out of the race. The texts are with an aide who he allegedly had an affair with and who ended up killing herself by lighting herself on fire. Other Republicans who might want him to leave because of all this understand, though, that the House Republican majority is so narrow that they can't afford to have him leave, because then they will be without a seat, a vote until that's a special election for that seat, and it would make it even more difficult to pass any legislation. But the next step is to see what happens in Tuesday's primary, where he already had a challenge, but now there's just an added level of drama.
And lest we forget, his main challenger, Brandon Herrera, also ran against him 2 years ago, nearly beat him in a very expensive and ugly primary runoff, only lost by a couple hundred votes. And that cycle, Republicans were worried that if Herrera were the nominee, they would put that seat in danger. This cycle now, there's some worry that maybe if Gonzales is the nominee, he'll put that seat in danger. But Herrera is also not a perfect candidate for Republicans here. And I think they're fortunate that Democrats don't have a top tier recruit ready to take advantage of that situation. In North Carolina, the Democratic primary for the 4th District has become increasingly expensive and personal in its closing week. Voters go to the polls next Tuesday, and millions of dollars in super PAC money from groups backed by AI company Anthropic, as well as a new progressive player, has flooded the Durham County race between Representative Valerie Foushee and Bernie Sanders-backed challenger Nida Alam. The two have met on the ballot before in 2022 when this was an open seat race. Foushee defeated Alam by 9 points, then 46-37%.
I mean, we are seeing a lot of credible primary challenges to incumbents. And typically incumbents win, and I think the vast majority of incumbents are going to win, but it feels like there are going to be a few that get knocked off. They're going to get a lot of attention, even if they are disproportionately a small number, but there's just so many credible challenges, whether it's for ideology, crypto, or age. There's a lot of different factors in these, but I feel like a couple incumbents at least are going to lose.
Yeah.
On a different note, political analyst Rhodes Cook passed away last week at the age of 78. He had his own political newsletter. He compiled county election results data for these America Votes books, if you're watching on YouTube. And Jacob and I, we got to work with Rhodes on the ABC election night decision desk for many years. Now, to me, Rhodes, his legacy includes just an admirable passion for accurate election data, and also a genuine kindness to younger analysts like us who are coming behind him.
Yeah, I was very sad to see the news about Rhodes's passing. I had the opportunity to work on a very small team with him in the 2024 cycle, and I appreciated him being welcoming. And, it was a treat to be able to talk to someone who had been doing election night returns for longer than pretty much anyone else, I think, probably working in that field, certainly at ABC, but potentially at any of the networks since the 1970s, when the the practice of election night projections was still essentially in its infancy, and he watched that field develop and grow into something that is quite incredible now today, and the focus of course, extreme amounts of attention every 2 years in November. So was sorry to see that news, but glad I had a chance to work with him for at least a little bit.
And I'll always remember when I was working on the decision desk with him, and we would have these rehearsals or practices before election night. And Rhodes was, locked in, great, and brings so much knowledge to it. But he sometimes would be, his eyes would drift over to another screen for a Penn State football game that was going on that conflicted with our rehearsal. But he was a proud Penn State fan. So may his memory be a blessing. I want to welcome our guest for today's episode, Shia Kapos. Shia is the author of Illinois Playbook at Politico, previously wrote for the Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Tribune, Crane Chicago Business, Shia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited. I've watched you guys before, so it's an honor to be here.
Well, you are the perfect person for the topic. But before we jump into what we have you here for, what congressional district did you grow up in?
Well, this sounds crazy. Okay, so I've lived in Chicago like more than 20 years, but I grew up in Utah. In a little town north of Salt Lake City, which I believe was a first district. So, at the risk of showing my age, Gunn McKay, a Democrat, was the congressperson. And that was back when Utah actually had like Democrats and Republicans who represented the entire state. And then I was still a kid, and then he lost to Jim Hansen, Republican, and the seat has stayed Republican ever since. So I have since moved to Chicago, and I live in a district that's up for grabs this session. So we can talk about that.
We will definitely get to that. Now, what did the young Shia in Utah think that she would be doing right now in her life?
Well, I always wanted to be a journalist. So like in high school, I worked at the school paper, and, I was into journalism from the very beginning. There was a moment where a lot of people in journalism and politics have to decide, do I want to be in journalism or do I want to be in politics? I love both. And I chose journalism. Sometimes I wish I had chosen politics, but I'm glad that they're kind of merged together now. So it's good.
Gosh, every time I hear the name of a member of Congress from a previous kind of generation, I'm just reminded that we have a dearth of great congressional names. Like we don't have any Gunn McKays in Congress now. I feel like for whatever reason, we're missing out on like a classic, someone who could be an SEC quarterback or a member of Congress from Utah.
And he did something different too, which you don't see very often anymore. He lost, but then he ran at least 2 other times trying to get the seat back and never got it. So I don't know why that doesn't happen anymore. Usually when people lose, they're gone and you don't see them again. But he kept running, trying to get it back.
Well, we'll talk about a couple former members who maybe have caught that bug in Illinois.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And I have to mention that there was a candidate named Gunnar DeLay who ran in Arkansas. I think he was a distant relative of Tom DeLay of Texas, but yeah, Gunnar DeLay, I think he lost in a Republican primary or something. This is 20 plus years ago. Someone can fact check me in the comments on it, but that would have been, up there with that. What you said, SEC quarterback names and also members of Congress.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive in. While voters in Texas, Arkansas, and North Carolina are going to the polls this Tuesday, March 3rd, a handful of consequential primaries in Illinois are coming up soon on March 17th. First elected to the House in 1982 and the Senate in 1996, Democrat Dick Durbin is not running for re-election, and there's a competitive Democratic primary to succeed him between Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, Lieutenant Governor Giuliana Stratton, and Congresswoman Robin Kelly. Let's listen to a couple of ads from the race.
Illinois didn't wait for Washington. We fought here. Higher wages, stronger gun laws, abortion rights protected. Giuliana Stratton is endorsed by Governor Pritzker because she helped lead those fights. Now she's running for Senate to stand up to Trump and cut the costs crushing Illinois families. Because the system is broken and families are paying the price. Giuliana Stratton, Illinois is sending a fighter.
My opponent's attacks are politics as usual. Here's the truth. I'm an immigrant myself, so this is personal. That's why I've demanded Trump's ICE be abolished. That's why I won't support another dime for ICE while it terrorizes communities. I'm Raja Krishnamurthy, and I approve this message. I fight Trump every day, and I'm the only candidate with a real plan to hold him accountable. My opponents can call me whatever they want. You can just call me Raja.
Shia, Krishnamurthy exercised his big financial advantage early and jumped out to an early lead, but there's been a lot more spending in ads lately. My question is Krishnamurthy the clear front runner, or is this a two-way race, or is it a three-way race here in the final couple weeks?
Well, of course, it depends on who you talk to. The latest poll I saw had Krishnamurthy still ahead by at least, I think, close to 20 points. But then there was a poll the day before from Juliana Stratton's team that had them almost neck and neck. It's hard for me to imagine that she could have gained that much ground since she's come out with ads and since the Political Action Committee supporting her has come out with ads, but maybe. She is pushing that she is gaining traction and that she is gaining momentum, which she probably is. I just don't know if it's to that extent. Robin Kelly has inched up in both of those polls too, but not to the same extent. I think Robin Kelly is interesting because she does have a bigger following downstate than people realize. And I'm curious how that will play out in the election. She is seen as a spoiler by a lot of people, that maybe if she wasn't in the race, that Juliana Stratton could have a better chance. I don't know. But right now, they're the three top. And there are half a dozen people, that are also running in addition to those three. So what is clear in all of the polls is there's at least 20% of people polled who don't know who they're voting for. So,
and that's a big number in a crowded field like this.
Yeah.
And I think you wrote about this today, that there is now what the big crypto super PAC is also getting involved on, essentially on Krishnamurthy's behalf. I guess they're
it's attacking Juliana Stratton, which means, and they're attacking her basically because she was endorsed by Elizabeth Warren, who the crypto world is not so happy with. So, so I haven't seen those ads come out yet, but there's, money going towards it. We'll see what they look like. It will benefit Krishnamurthy, but it will also benefit Robin Kelly. I imagine she could see more of the benefit even than Krishnamurthy. So,
okay. Is there any indication, that has crypto been at all a conversation in this race? How unexpected was it to have, obviously this is an outside group that spends in a lot of different races around the country, but they hadn't been in this one. Is it surprising that they're getting involved? Did everyone kind of anticipate that sooner or later someone would come in with a lot of outside money to throw at one of these candidates?
I was surprised, the candidate endorsed by Governor J.B. Pritzker, because he's endorsing Juliana Stratton. Who would have thought that a crypto company would come after her? But maybe we shouldn't have been surprised because they're also involved in another race, going after two races, actually, going after two congressional candidates. So we shouldn't have been surprised that they were in the mix in Illinois. They're just expanding their footprint.
And what have we seen from the governor? How much of his own political and financial capital has he put behind Stratton? And how important do you think it is to him and his own political ambitions that she is successful in this Democratic primary?
He just put $5 million into the super PAC that is supporting her. And that's a super PAC that was hers, that she started before she ran for office. And so now it runs independently. She was part of it, and now it's independent. He put money into that. Much of her team, they are Pritzker people that he's worked with over the years. They are working with her now to shape her campaign. I haven't seen ads yet by him, but I wonder if we will. He started to do ads for a few other people that he's endorsed, the comptroller, for example. So I imagine it's a matter of time that he'll do one for Juliana Stratton too. He doesn't have to worry about his reputation as governor. He doesn't have a primary. He will probably face a familiar face in November. Maybe he'll win. Maybe, that could be competitive, but right. what people are really looking at is what happens if he runs for president, and would it hurt him as a presidential candidate if he couldn't get his lieutenant governor to win the Senate, a Senate race? I don't know.
And how surprised
you guys are more experts at that than I am.
well, how surprised are you? I mean, you're on the ground that this is where we are, right? Stratton could clearly win, but she's coming from behind to win. I mean, and when we zoom out to Democratic primaries over the last number of cycles, women have done extremely well, right? I mean, like being a woman in a Democratic primary is part of the resume. That's part of the profile that you want to have. So I guess, are you surprised that she is coming from behind and Krishnamurthy, had that initial early lead, or is this sort of how you envisioned it playing out?
I think we knew from the beginning that Krishnamurthy would be ahead because he had such a large war chest. I mean, we knew he was going to be spending, and he has been spending on ads for more than 6 months. So he's been on the air. I'm surprised that Stratton wasn't able to raise more money sooner. That it was interesting. And that she didn't, when she did have money, why didn't she start advertising sooner? That seemed like something that should have happened too. I think the reason that she's not doing better is because you have a very competent, very well-liked African-American woman in Robin Kelly, who is also running. And she, remember, ran the state Democratic Party. She has, feelers all over the state. People know her all over the state. She's very well-liked in Congress. I think there are 30, 40 members of Congress who have endorsed her. And they haven't endorsed Raja. So that says a lot. And, I think that's why you don't see a Juliana Stratton, at the top of the heap there.
And I guess we should say that this is a good case where the Democratic primary, the primary, is the most consequential election in the race. I mean, Republicans are worried about defending their majority, and they are going on offense in a few places, but there's no talk about being on offense on the Republican side in Illinois.
Right. Yeah, we're a Democratic state here. More than likely, the Democratic candidate will win in November. However, there are I think 4 Republicans running for Senate, including the former state Republican Party chair, a really bright guy. And then there's an interesting woman who's also running. So, you never know what happens in these. Somebody could fumble the ball after they win the primary, and, next thing you know, Barack Obama is the senator. That's what happened.
We should probably check to see who's been divorced and what are in those divorce records of candidates if those exist.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, the Stratton campaign put out a campaign ad a couple days ago that got a lot of buzz online. They put out an uncensored version online, and then I guess to comply with broadcast rules, they put a censored version. How is that playing out? It feels a little gimmicky, but maybe that's do voters want to see that kind of language and see that from their lieutenant governor and potentially their next senator.
Yeah, well, so just to make it so people listening know what we're talking about, the ad was people saying F Trump, but they said the actual word again and again and again. I am probably a little older than you guys, and I was like, really? Do we have to do that? And I thought I was being a prude, but then I happened to be with some friends who immediately complained about it. So in my newsletter, I asked people what they thought, and it was kind of mixed. Some people think it's funny, some people don't. There's a mix on whether you should do it or not. So maybe it's an age thing. I think it's kind of like comedy to me. I think the best comedians don't have to swear. So do you have to swear in a political ad to get people's attention? One of my readers said, well, yes, if you're talking about Donald Trump and you're a Democrat. So.
Yeah, no,
You're playing to the audience here. You've researched Nathan.
I didn't think I was going to be dropping a Nate Bargatze line, but he's trying to carve out this. Well, I'll say carve out clean comedy and stuff. Even though Jim Gaffigan was doing clean comedy, he probably was even more paving the way. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I don't know that but if it resonates with voters, I could see why a candidate would try to go there, particularly if you're trying to distinguish yourself in a primary.
Exactly. And it was funny, I guess. I'm guessing if you have kids, though, you don't want them to be hearing that. So, even though we saw it and it might have been online broadcast, it's not. You didn't hear the word on broadcast TV. So,
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some House races.
Oh my gosh, we've got 5 of them, really.
Well, Jacob, why don't you lead us through the key ones?
Yeah, we've got a lot to get through. There is so much to talk about in terms of the open seats. Everyone decided this is the time to get out of Congress, and a few people have decided this is the time to get back into Congress. So we'll start with the second district. We talked about Robin Kelly running for Senate, leaving that seat open. Southern Chicago suburbs, far southeast Chicago, a very Democratic seat again. So we're talking about the Democratic primary as the most consequential contest here. Long list of people running for this race, including former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr.
Yes,
who held this seat a decade plus ago before he went to federal prison. Walk us through kind of what's going on here, how real the comeback attempt is, and who else is at play in this second district.
Well, for the longest time, he has been seen as the front runner just because of his name recognition. He is taking the campaign seriously. He's been, going around the district, doing a lot of meetings with people, trying to get to know people, because the district has changed. There was redistricting. It's changed since he was there. So he has spent, to his credit, talking to a lot of people, trying to get to know them. His fundraising is not that great. I imagine it's because either people, if they're not concerned, they don't want their name to appear on a list, maybe, or maybe he's just not doing the fundraising. He doesn't need to, because people know who he is. And I keep saying, to his credit, when I just saw a debate, and it was a healthcare debate of the candidates, and he was really spot on. He and Donna Miller, the other person in the race, she has a healthcare background. So when you heard him speak, you can understand why he is in it. And he, would probably do a fine job. He was able to talk about the Affordable Care Act in a way that a lot of the others couldn't. It was interesting and fascinating. So today I just saw him at his father's memorial service. When I had spoken to him at the debate, he had been juggling those issues. All the kids in the family were caring for their dad, taking turns, and then he was on the campaign trail. So the other people in the race are two state senators, actually, Democrats, and then a commissioner, Donna Miller, who is very popular in the district. She has been criticized, though, because she is getting support from an AIPAC-funded super PAC doing positive ads for her. I don't know that AIPAC matters to people in that district, to Black voters. I don't know. But it isn't, they're there. And then one of the state senators, Robert Peters, a really popular senator in the legislature, he is also in the mix, probably one of the top 3 or 4. But there's it's a crypto PAC that is going against him because he voted on legislation that would call for regulations. So, you guys mentioned in one of those earlier segments about all these super PACs getting involved, that is the case in that second district.
And so, there are a number of candidates here. Fair to say, though, that Jackson and Peters and Miller are kind of the three to watch. Is there anyone else you would throw in that mix?
Yeah, there's another state senator, Willie Preston, who is the Black Caucus chair of the state legislature. He's also been very vocal, and he's been more critical of Jackson in debates. He'll make little asides about things. They all have their own base, and there are some other candidates too. So when you like with any race, you just wonder, they don't need very much to win in a race like this. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, I want to ask, because not to harp too much on Jesse Jackson Jr., but both because of the circumstances of his departure from Congress 15 years ago, which was embarrassing and not a positive story for him at all. But then also, again, the fact that his father just passed away, national news. I mean, is there an element of a sympathy vote here coming up on 2 weeks before Election Day? And do voters still remember and care about the corruption charges and the personal issues that led him out of Congress the first time?
well, he will tell you, remember, I mean, people get it all mixed up. He left Congress before he faced these charges.
Okay.
He had mental health issues and took, he left Congress for that. And then he probably had those issues because of the stress of knowing that he was going to be charged. But then he was charged and all that happened. Do people remember it? I think they do. Whether they buy his argument that he has done his time, which he has, and that he, needs a second chance, we'll see that'll show, I guess, in the results of the primary. I think that's what he doesn't hide from the fact that he had to go through that. He doesn't shy away from it. He knows, or says he knows, he did wrong and did his time and now wants a second chance. So in a lot of communities, I'm guessing people will say, yeah, you deserve a second chance. And will there be a sympathy vote? I've heard people talk about that there could be. So yeah, sure. I mean, judging by the lines today, there were hundreds of people in line to go view and pay their respects to the families. So that could definitely be an issue.
No.
And whether it's this race or the next ones that we're going to talk about, and no runoff provision in Illinois, I mean, you could see a winner or a nominee with 30%,
20%, like when we talk about one of these or two of these districts, there are so many candidates, the winner could have less than 20%. I mean, crazy.
Raised by a single mom on public assistance, fear doesn't stop you. When you care for your sister with disabilities who depends on Medicare and Medicaid, you learn how to fight. And when Donald Trump attacks everything you believe in, you never back down. For Melissa Conyers-Ervin, lowering costs, protecting health care, and stopping Donald Trump, it's personal. Melissa Conyers-Ervin, fearless, ready to fight. UDP is responsible for the content of this ad.
Well, let's talk about a race where I hope you can give us some clarity, because I certainly am looking for some, and that is the 7th district.
Wow.
Another open seat. Longtime Congressman Danny Davis not seeking re-election after several years in which he faced some serious primary challenges. You've got City Treasurer Melissa Conyers-Ervin, Keena Collins, who is a progressive who's run against Danny Davis several times before, State Representative LaShawn Ford, prominent emergency room physician, Jason Friedman, a developer with a bunch of money, former Cook County commissioners, labor leaders. Help us out here. What's going on in this 7th district, and who are the candidates most likely to be able to end up ahead?
Well, until recently, and I'll get to that point, LaShawn Ford, State Representative LaShawn Ford, has been in the lead as far as I can tell with people I've talked to. And that's in part because Danny Davis has endorsed him. And Danny Davis has he has a good loyal constituency. He meets with constituents, he holds meetings, he Zoom meetings, he's holds in-person meetings. So he is very beloved. So his endorsement means a lot. And until it got super cold here, Danny Davis was like knocking on doors with LaShawn Ford, which was pretty wild. So that that was the case, but now I don't know because you've got I counted there's 7 super PACs involved in this race now, including one targeting LaShawn Ford,
Hmm.
like in the 2nd district because he voted for regulations on crypto.
Hmm.
Will that hurt him? Could be, and then there's a super PAC supporting Melissa Conyers-Ervin, who is a city treasurer, was a state representative, whose husband is on the city council. She's very well known. So, that I can't call what's going to happen in that race. I don't think, even though Keena Collins may have a base, she doesn't have any money as far as I can tell and hasn't reported. It was, FEC rules. What was the deadline? How many weeks ago? She
Yeah, the
still has not
31st.
reported. So we don't know what she's doing with money.
Hmm.
Thomas Fisher is a doctor an emergency room doctor. So his ads are kind of cute. He's in his blue scrubs, walking through a hospital. And he has a lot of support from Obama allies. And Lauren Underwood, Representative Lauren Underwood has endorsed him. They worked together at Health and Human Services under Obama during the Obama administration. And that's one, there's so many, I think, are there 15 candidates, I think?
Sounds about right.
I mean, that means it could be anybody's race. That's the one race I cannot call. Like, I'm supposed to write, pre-writes to be ready for election night. I don't know how I can do that because there are too many to guess who could win.
Yeah. Just tell your editor, let's just wait. It's going to take you less time to write the one for whoever wins than the 14 versions.
So true. So true.
Well, let's take a look at another one that has a similarly expansive field, and that is the 8th district, where Roger Krishnamurthy, who we talked about in the Senate race, is not running for re-election. We've got another former member attempting a comeback, former Congresswoman Melissa Bean, who lost her seat in 2010. But you have more Cook County local office holders who are there. You've got more former candidates who have run before, as well as a number of other self-funders and wealthy candidates and people with interesting backgrounds. What's going on in this kind of western outer suburbs district?
Well, judging by how Melissa Bean is running her campaign, she seems to be trying to keep low on the radar, not make waves, not address criticisms that she's being, supported by an APAC funded super PAC. Because if you don't say anything and don't make waves, then you don't make enemies, I guess. So I expect she is in the lead, judging by how she is running the campaign. Junaid Ahmed ran against Krishnamurthy, I think, last time and did pretty well, considering Krishnamurthy, been a long time congressman, and he is presenting himself as a progressive in the race. He is a progressive, and has gotten lots of progressive endorsements. I don't know how that's going to play out. If people are going to, will it be like New Jersey where they're irritated that, will they notice that the pro ads for Melissa Bean are put out by a super PAC that has been controversial? I don't know how closely they look or not.
And this one, the other candidates, we've got Kevin Morrison, Cook County Commissioner, who has attracted a lot of support from gay rights groups and groups that support LGBT candidates. You've got Dan Tully, who's a veteran and lawyer. And then you've got this guy who I had not heard of until he jumped in the race, Ryan Vedekad, who is probably, I don't know, I think he might be 24. He might not actually be 25 yet, or maybe he just turned 25. But he raised, I think, $100,000 in his first 24 hours, a big number. And so that caught my eye too, though it seems like he's not necessarily going to win here.
He was in the forum I saw. He was it was a good conversation. He was a great contributor to the conversation. I do think Morrison. I thought Kevin Morrison would have more umph in this.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's because once Melissa Bean got in, those supporters moved to her, because he is a popular county commissioner. So I just don't know how that base will transfer. I haven't seen a lot of ads for him. So um, uh, I guess I haven't for Melissa Bean either, except from the APAC group. So, and that, you talked about lots of candidates. That is only 6 candidates, I think, or so.
It's a relatively small
Yes.
field.
Well, and before we turn the page from Krishnamurthy, I mean, this being the seat that he is leaving, one of my favorite things over the years was Roll Call does these hits and misses videos where each week they compile different clips. And there's one in particular where on the floor of the House, or Mike Bost is presiding. Mike Bost, the Republican congressman from downstate, and he is referring to his Illinois colleague, Raja Krishnamurthy, and he cannot get his name right. And I think he mispronounces it 3 different ways. It's not even that he was just saying it the same. He just could not do it. And I, it's just like, for some reason, I found that particularly funny. I'll try to find the link and put it in the comments.
I don't know how you could get it wrong, because Krishnamurthy has had so many ads on TV.
Yeah. Well, this was a while ago.
Yeah, but
so
he really plays off of his name, though, because he knows his name might be complicated for people. He says, "Just call me Raja." So everybody knows him as Raja.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this seat, I feel like this seat kind of punches above its weight. Obviously Krishnamurthy on the verge of potentially becoming the next United States Senator. Before him, Tammy Duckworth, the other senator here. Before her, Joe Walsh, who has remained, he never was able to win anything else, but has run for president, become a very popular on the Democratic anti-Trump circuit. I think now he's talking about running for something in South Carolina, where he lives now. And before that, Melissa Bean, who is hoping to make a comeback here. She, of course, lost to Walsh in 2010, and is playing off of that vote that she took in favor of Obamacare as a way to burnish her, Democratic bona fides, as she's taking heat for being, perhaps not the most progressive candidate in the race. She had an ad recently that I saw where she talked about, I voted for Obamacare even though I knew it would cost me my seat. I think that's, I imagine that's a pretty compelling message in a Democratic primary.
Yes, her opponents, though, say you weren't going to vote. You didn't vote till the very last. You didn't support it until the very last moment. Where were you all those months beforehand? So
some of those candidates may not have been born yet. I don't know who's making those. But I mean, it would be interesting if Melissa Bean does end up winning, since in probably a good Democratic cycle, that when she was first elected, it was in a good Democratic cycle. And when Republicans were kind of on the ropes with George W. Bush in the final years of George W. Bush's presidency.
So yeah, isn't that funny? Yeah. George W. Bush, so long ago.
We're really name dropping everybody here, but
AIPAC and Trump donors are attacking Daniel Biss. Illinois' 9th district belongs to all of us, not Trump donors or AIPAC. I won't stand by and let them pick my successor. We need real fighters in Congress who know how to get things done. And that's why I'm endorsing Daniel Biss for Congress.
Just like Daniel Biss took on ICE in our streets,
get the hell out of this.
He'll keep fighting for us in Congress.
I'm Daniel Biss, and I approve this message.
Let's talk about the last kind of open seat big primary here, and the one that has probably gotten, I would argue, the most national media attention, and that's the 9th district, where longtime Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky is not seeking re-election. You've got another big primary here, but one that has feels like it has boiled down to 3 candidates, all of whom have been getting a lot of national attention. Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss, State Senator Laura Fine, and journalist / influencer / Twitter power user Kat Abugazala. Is Biss going to win this primary? It seems like there are polls every day out of this district that show somewhat different things here. Right. What's going on in this 9th district?
The latest poll I saw today had Biss ahead, but a poll yesterday had Biss and Kat Abugazala neck and neck. And the one a few days before that had Laura Fine and Biss. I think the thinking is Biss, if he is not in first place in any poll, he's likely second place. And so that means in the end, it would be good for him. the question is, okay, we've got, 20 days left until the election, and there is a lot of super PAC money coming in, focused on supporting Laura Fine. And will that turn off these 9th district voters who are super educated on elections, who are super into the process, who are, very aware of who AIPAC is and what they're doing? The question is whether those AIPAC-funded ads will offend people and have them turn from Laura Fine to somebody else. Will they turn to Daniel Biss? Will they turn to Kat Abu-Ghazaleh, like they did in New Jersey? Daniel Biss is Jewish too, so that means it's not quite the same thing as New Jersey was. And a lot of people, I just wrote a story about how people in this district recognize that it has been held by a Jewish person for decades and decades. And for that reason, that will, impact how they vote.
Yeah, it does feel, the parallels to New Jersey feel somewhat eerily similar, where you've got 3 candidates. The leading candidate is one who is I think probably fair to say started out in the mainstream of Democratic politics on Israel, and that's Daniel Biss, whose parents are Israeli, and
he
who
vacations. His family vacation in Israel every year.
And I think has like many Democrats talked about how he doesn't agree with Netanyahu, and he's open to conditioning aid on offensive weapons and things like that. And then you've got a candidate who is more in line with AIPAC in Laura Fine, or in New Jersey, Tahisha Way. And then you've got a candidate who has made their name in many regards as a critic of Israel in Kat Abu-Ghazaleh. And AIPAC ultimately helped get the most anti-Israel candidate elected in New Jersey, Anna Lilia Mejia. And they turned Tom Malinowski, I think, into a much more outspoken critic of Israel along the way. And I wonder if something similar has happened here. Has Biss essentially been pushed into a more critical stance with regard to Israel than he started the race with, simply because they have come in so hard against him and for Laura Fine? And conversely, after New Jersey, has anyone in the district or in the ecosystem kind of taken a look around and said, wait a minute, like, AIPAC, you guys are going to get Kat elected if you continue to spend like crazy for Laura Fine and she can't get over the finish line?
I think it's a little bit different because Kat isn't the only progressive in the race. Bushra Amawali, she is as progressive as Kat is, and she's an elected official on a school board within the district. And it's funny that Laura Fine is perceived to be more conservative when she's really a progressive in the state legislature. But on this particular issue about, putting restrictions on funding, she thinks that there are enough restrictions already, basically. That's why AIPAC is supporting her. And Biss is saying no. Another debate is, why did Daniel Biss talk to AIPAC early in the process? Was he trying to get funding and their support? And he says no, he was just trying to state what his beliefs are. But the fact that he, talked to AIPAC has people questioning, like, was he playing both sides? I don't know.
What I'm curious about is has Biss, it seems like Biss has become more openly critical of Israel as the campaign has gone on.
Yes.
I wonder, and it feels like that has potentially backfired, especially if he ends up winning. And is there any talk of AIPAC and its allies changing their strategy in this race or the other Illinois races after what we saw happen in New Jersey?
I don't know. I just feel like people here know the candidates better, and that AIPAC funding isn't going to impact them one way or another. They know where Daniel Biss is coming from. They know where Laura Fine is coming from. So if you were offended by AIPAC helping Laura Fine, you weren't going to vote for her anyway. You were probably going to vote for somebody else. So I don't know. I'm trying to remember how many people were in the New Jersey race. It was a big. It was a big.
It was a big field. There were probably 10
Oh,
or
okay.
11 candidates on the ballot, and
Okay.
probably 6 of them that had resources to spend. So it was a considerable number.
Okay, that is similar then. And there are a few other candidates. Well, there's a progressive state senator running and a progressive state representative running, and they have bases that we don't talk about very much. Mike Simmons is always, listed in the top 6 candidates. An African American gay man who could have, a base of support when you've got 17 people that makes a difference in the race.
Yeah.
And what's been the reaction to on the ground to Abu Ghazala and her resume or her profile? Right, she's probably one of the most prominent influencer candidates that we have seen, and I'm sure we will see more. But I'm wondering, she has this national profile and network, but what does that look like, and how is that viewed among Democratic primary voters, in this district?
In the district, a lot of skepticism initially because she didn't live here. She wasn't from here. The word carpetbagger came up a few times. When I met her though in person, I thought she was really smart. I thought, she was a perfectly fine candidate to run for this. She held her own. I do notice that she has a better online presence than at a debate. These debates give people an opportunity to see, where the candidates are coming from. So you really saw how they are part of the community, where they grew up, where they went to school, what neighborhoods they live in, where they, how they have impacted the community with the work they do. And that was telling because she didn't have that. So sometimes it came across that she didn't, wasn't as deeply embedded. But then I've talked to young people who say, well, why does that matter? She's in Congress. She's dealing with issues it's not about whether my garbage is picked up or anything. So maybe it won't matter. I just checked to see, and Northwestern University, which is in the district and probably has a lot of her supporters, because sometimes, the spring break comes around during these elections and they're not around to vote anyway. But it's their finals week. So if they, if they go to school and are residents to be registered to vote here, that could have an impact, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I felt old when, at least a little while ago, when I was on her campaign website, and candidates have social media, the icons to go to social media platforms. Facebook was not even a part of that initial list, which the campaign does have a presence on Facebook, but I thought maybe that's a flex, to like, well, I'm not even on Facebook, but the campaign does have it. But like, oh man, I'm getting old.
Yeah, and I'll admit I was initially very skeptical of her and her candidacy, and especially she very early on she made a big deal about how she said she wasn't going to run ads. That she said, TV ads are outdated and they're not how we want to reach voters, and I'm not going to listen to consultants who tell me to run TV ads. I'm going to spend money in new and innovative ways and do a lot of direct community engagement. And I said, okay, you're not going to win. And then several months into her campaign, she said, hey guys, we're going to run TV ads because they're still the best way to reach people. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, you've raised all this money and now you're doing what you need to do. Sometimes the consultants are right. And that was the moment where she kind of professionalized in a way. And I realized that I had kind of maybe been incorrect in my initial assumption about her ability to run a real campaign and potentially win this race.
Yeah, I think she's run a real campaign. I don't have a physical copy, but the mailers that have gone out are very creative. They're more they're cartoons and colorful, and it's different than what you usually see in all the mailers. And there are a lot of mailers. Believe me, this district is like loading all the mailboxes up. Yeah.
Well, I want to get your thoughts on one final House race here, not a Democratic primary, but that's part of the issue. And that is, of course, the 4th district,
Right.
where Congressman Chuy Garcia is not seeking reelection. Now, he thought that he had arranged it such that his chief of staff, Patty Garcia, no relation, would be the only candidate to file and that she would be able to walk into this seat. It's a trick that many members of Congress have pulled before, including in Illinois, but it seems to have blown up in both of their faces at this point. You just wrote today, I believe, in your newsletter about another Democrat, Mayor Chris Getty, who is going to run as an independent in the general election. I believe there are 2 others, at least, Mayra Macias and Byron Sigcho Lopez, who are also Democratic operatives or office holders who are running as an independent in the general election. What the heck is going on here? And are all these people actually going to be on the ballot? And if you got 4 Democrats running, could a Republican win this district?
I don't, I don't see a Republican winning this district. It'll be one of those 4.
No.
People are so angry, they were so angry that this happened because, Illinois gets a bad rap about corruption. And Chuy Garcia is somebody who has always preached, transparency and being, above that. And then for this to happen, even though he says it was for personal reasons, he didn't realize about his health issues until the very last minute. It's really angered a lot of people, especially progressives. That's why Byron Sigcho Lopez, a big progressive alderman in the Chicago City Council, he has been very outspoken on the issue. Mayra has a big, Obama and Biden background. I mean, she's very progressive. People are just, they want they wanted a chance to run for the seat and should have been given that chance. So yeah, and the way it works, Garcia will win the primary, and then in November we'll see all these independents and the Republican and Garcia on the list. And I don't know. I think Mayra is getting is doing well in fundraising for an independent, and so maybe that'll play out in November. But the traditional party folks are getting behind Garcia. So
Interesting. Do you think that people would have been as mad about how this played out if Chuy didn't have this reputation of being a good government advocate? That because it felt so kind of out of character, or just like a break from how people knew him before when he ran against Rahm and he was trying to position himself differently. If he had been like, not to call out the Lipinskis, but, the Lipinskis pulled this off 2 decades ago. And, I don't think anyone was surprised that Father Lipinski successfully organized that handoff. But it feels like it's kind of almost the betrayal angle of this that's really getting to people, in addition to just like the fact of the matter.
Exactly. And I think the Democratic Party here is trying to break away from the bad reputation it has of, doing things, the old way. And then something like this happens and, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's like they can't get away from it. And I think it's unfortunate if Garcia wins. She's going to have to always have this hanging over her, that's how she won. Does she really want to win that way? I mean, it's too late now, but
and she'll probably immediately have a serious primary from next January. Assuming if she does win, then at least one of these candidates is going to challenge her in a legitimate Democratic primary in 2028.
Right.
Well, this has been fantastic. I know I learned through this, so I'm sure everyone else had to learn something, but hopefully you could stick around for a couple minutes and do our final segment.
Oh, yes. I'm excited that we were able to talk all about this and we never even got into the mayor's race. That's usually what I want to talk about here.
Oh, man. Yeah.
We got to get through 26 first, and then we can one year at a time.
And now it's time for our final segment, Look What I Found, where we talk about anything new that we've been into. Sometimes it's movies, music, food. It can really be anything. Jacob, what did you find?
So I recently finished a novel called Declare by Tim Powers that was recommended to me by a newsletter that I really enjoy called Read Max. I think I've talked about that newsletter before on the show. I've read a bunch of books that Max Read, the author, has suggested. Declare is a spy novel about a Cold War British spy, but it's also an occult supernatural storyline that takes place in World War II and during the Cold War and in the Middle East, in Turkey and elsewhere in the Mid East. So it's long. It's probably 600 or 700 pages, but I found it really captivating. And even though it was written 25, 26 years ago, it still very much holds up. And if you like either spy novels like Le Carré or kind of spookier novels, it hits both corners pretty effectively.
Wow, 600 pages. That's a lot.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, as someone who knows how much work you do and put into your normal job, like, how do you have time to read 600 pages?
It took me a while. I'm off my game a little bit. But I was on a lot of planes over the last couple weeks, so I had plenty of time to knock out big chunks of it without interference from the internet.
Well, now I feel bad if I'm on a plane and I'm watching scenes from Top Gun Maverick, and Jacob's reading these intricate spy novels. But Shia, what did you find?
Okay, so the other day I was at a bookstore that I like to go to near my house, and I found an autographed copy of Obama book, The Promise by Jonathan Alter, who's a businessman here who I've covered. He's the brother of a businessman. And it's signed. So I'm excited to read it and look through it because my newsletter, the Illinois Playbook, has trivia questions. And I like to pull, I usually have the winners of each day give a trivia question, but sometimes they don't come through. So I like to have books on hand that, might offer little tidbits that people don't know, like I have the Daily Show about Richard M. Daley's administration. So that's what I found. I'm excited to have it.
So is it autographed by Jonathan Alter or Barack Obama?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Initially, I was very excited because it said autographed copy, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then I was like, "Oh, the author wrote it."
Still fun, a fun find.
Yeah.
But not necessarily in the presidential succession or in the presidential line. So I found, on a slightly different note, I found this shirt that I'm wearing. For those of you that are watching, it just happens to be a Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks shirt. I don't know where. It was just online. My credit card happened to go in. They sent me a shirt. I don't know how I found it, but I'm wearing some of this gear with pride as a Pacific Northwest kid, I guess, at heart.
That's funny.
No. We'll let you get this one.
Well, wait. Next year, I'm sure Jacob will be wearing Giants Giant Super Bowl shirt.
Knock on wood.
Oh, wow. You're a Giants fan? Oh, my gosh.
I am. Yeah. Much suffering. Much suffering Giants fan. But, we've got a lot to look forward to. We're excited to have Harbaugh, and we're hoping for a better year than we've had in a little while, at least.
Well, you played a part because Leonard Williams and Julian Love were two of the big pieces on the Seahawks defense who just had to leave the Giants in order to get the trophy. But
hopefully my family can now continue to cheer for the Chicago Bears and not the Indiana Bears or the Hoosier Bears, whatever they could be. That's a whole other show, I'm sure.
Yeah,
that would be weird, but it looks like it could happen. I don't know. Well, thank you, Shia. This has been fantastic. People need to read Illinois Playbook, follow you on Twitter, but thank you for being part of this.
Thanks so much. Totally fun.
At Inside Elections, we provide nonpartisan analysis of congressional, presidential, and gubernatorial races. With a combination of reporting and data, we break down the key races and bring valuable context to complex elections. Please go to InsideElections.com to subscribe to the biweekly newsletter. We have individual subscriptions as well as group packages that are tailored for association and corporate PACs. If you like today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, rate us on your favorite platform, watch us, click the thumbs up on YouTube. If you didn't like today's episode, please email Gunner Delay. We also want to thank our producers, Alan Tazinski and Melissa Lenner of Pretty Easy Podcasts, and our associate producer, Conrad Tolosa. Please come back and join us again next time.